reason, I think what we learned from this evening is the reason why organisations like the Abortion Rights Campaign still need to exist and will always need to exist, and we will always need to fight to keep the little access we have and to keep progressing for more and more access until we have free, safe and legal abortion for anyone who needs it. I would just like to remind everyone that here in the Republic of Ireland, our submission on our own legislation, our review submission is now open until the 1st of April. It would be really great if anyone had time between now and the 1st of April, if they could log on and do a public submission. You do not have to be a service user to submit to it. It's really important we have as many pro-choice voices as possible submitting to that, and we have a link, a blog post on our own website, and we're constantly posting about it on social media with the link to it. So if you need help finding that or need help about how to go about it, it's all on our website. We are always looking for new volunteers, so if anyone is interested in getting involved, please email the info@abortionrights.ie. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for being here. Thanks to all our panelists. I hope you really enjoyed the evening, and I'm sure we'll all learn a lot from each other. And I'd just like to hand over to our chair, Mara Clarke, now, and she will continue the rest of the evening.
Two years in, still can't use Zoom. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the International Women's Day panel organized by the amazing Abortion Rights Campaign of the Republic of Ireland. We have a brilliant panel for you today, made of people who've been working to help women and pregnant people access abortions in Europe and the US. We will start our journey with Jennifer Mckenna of the United States, where elected officials and other right-wing anti-abortion forces have been chipping systemically away at Roe versus Wade since it passed almost 50 years ago. Then we'll hear from Kasia Roszek-Van Hove about Poland, where a constitutional tribunal recently changed Poland's abortion legislation from the 4th worst in Europe to tied for 2nd, and where 3 women have died as a result of this new law. Then we'll go on to Naomi in Northern Ireland, where abortion was made legal more than 2 years ago, but also where abortion services have not yet been commissioned. Then, lest we get too discouraged, we'll hear from Lara Dimitrijevic in Malta, which has the dubious honor of having the most restrictive abortion law in Europe. Abortion is not even allowed to save a woman's life, but amazing Maltese activists have made exceptional strides in changing public opinion since launching Malta's pro-choice campaign in 2019. Then on to Ireland, which liberalized its abortion law in 2018 after a historic referendum. But Gillian Kearns and Wasikara Sikarani Banda, if she's able to join us later, will explain while there's still miles to go to ensure free, safe, legal, local access for everyone who needs abortions. And finally, we will celebrate with Kaylee Linares in Gibraltar, where a pro-choice campaign was launched in early 2019 and where the abortion law was liberalized in June 2021, and actually probably would have been in March 2020 if something hadn't come up that postponed the referendum. So let's start, if we may, with Jennifer Mckenna from the US. I'll just give you a short intro and then hand over to you. Jennifer Mckenna is Program Director of the Alliance State Advocates for Women's Rights and Gender Equality, a collaborative of law and policy centers working for reproductive and gender justice in states around the US, and Director of the Alliance Crisis Pregnancy Center Project. She is also a co-founder of California Women's Law Center, serves on the advisory board of the Abortion Rights Fund of Western Massachusetts, and advocates for abortion rights at the state level. Take it away, Jennifer.
Great, thank you, Mara. Thank you, everyone. First, I wanted to actually send love and strength out to pregnant Ukrainians having their babies in metro stations and as refugees, right now, and especially Ukrainians who don't want to be pregnant, fleeing to countries where it will be impossible to get an abortion. As you all know, the US is experiencing an historic and heartbreaking regression in abortion rights. This is happening amidst and tied into rising authoritarianism, white supremacy, and Christian nationalism in this country, as well as mounting voter suppression and escalating attacks on LGBT and especially trans people's rights. The US Supreme Court is now dominated by a supermajority of conservative and publicly anti-abortion justices. In December, that court heard a case, Dobbs v. Jackson, that challenges a blatantly unconstitutional Mississippi ban on abortion after 15 weeks. This is a direct challenge to Roe v. Wade, the 1973 ruling that established abortion as a fundamental constitutional right, and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, a 1992 case that affirmed the right to abortion prior to fetal viability. The court's decision is expected in June and widely expected to uphold the Mississippi law in a ruling that either guts or overturns Roe, reversing half a century of the court's own precedent and undoing a federal right under which 2 whole generations of Americans have lived. 26 states are queued up to ban abortion outright or before fetal viability when it does. Meantime, the Supreme Court has already allowed the state of Texas to nullify Roe for the 27 million people of reproductive age who live there. Last September, the court allowed Texas SB 8, the most extreme abortion ban ever passed, to become law. It bans abortion after 6 weeks, no exception for rape, incest, fetal anomaly, or fetal death. And it's enforced by a vigilante system where individuals are empowered to sue anyone they suspect of aiding or abetting an abortion and earn a $10,000 bounty in reward. Under SB 8, abortions in Texas have fallen by 50% or more. Texans who can manage to travel out of state have to travel 14 times as far. And of course, the costs and stresses of arranging travel, childcare, accommodation, time off are exponentially worse. And I want to acknowledge, I know the traumas of being forced to travel from home for abortion care are all too familiar to all of you. Now, other states are flooded with Texans seeking care. New Mexico, Kansas, Colorado, and Missouri report an 800% increase in Texas patients. An Oklahoma clinic reports 10 times as many Texans. And a Louisiana clinic reports 2/3 of their patients are now from Texas. So Texans are displacing people in those states who need abortion, and that's delaying care for everyone. Most patients are now in their late first or early second trimesters because of the backlog. Meanwhile, last year, as the Supreme Court nullified Roe in Texas and prepared to overturn Roe for the rest of the country, a staggering 536 state abortion restrictions were proposed. By the end of 2021, Republican-led states had enacted a record 100 new abortion restrictions. Now they're pushing more, expecting the court to overturn Roe. Already this year, at least 531 new anti-abortion bills have been introduced in 40 states. And that's only part of what they're trying to do. Other laws they're trying to ban abortion, of course, but they're also trying to ban, restrict telemedicine abortion, require fetal remain burials and cremations, much more. In short, as we face loss of the federal right to abortion in this country, the state landscape is dire. Only 29 states have hostile abortion laws, and 5 more states are at risk of losing protections, leaving only 16 states sure to protect abortion rights. If I can do a quick screen share, I don't want to use up my time sharing the screen, but let me show you this because I think it's a powerful visual. Obviously the red states are the ones that will ban or severely restrict abortion after Roe is overturned, which we expect to happen this summer. Let me undo the share screen if I can. Stop share. Okay. And I want to just also note that last Monday, the US Senate Republicans, the federal level, blocked a bill to codify abortion rights under federal law. So it's all going to revert to the states. Meanwhile, I wanted to share with you, there's anti-abortion lawmakers have also advanced another strategy under the radar, mostly expanding crisis pregnancy centers in this country. While mounting state abortion restrictions have shuttered more and more clinics, there are now fewer than 780 abortion clinics in the US, down from close to 3,000 in the 70s, and whole states with only 1. CPCs have expanded, and they're now more than 2,500, some say as closer to 4,000 CPCs across the US. They outnumber abortion clinics by 3 to 1 overall, and in some states by 11 to 1. As you know, CPCs are fake clinics that target pregnant people with deceptive and predatory practices and prevent them from accessing abortion and contraception and convert them to evangelical Christianity. What you might not know is that CPCs, at least in this country, are collecting massive amounts of data on pregnant people through counseling, online chat platforms, smartphone apps, and feeding their sensitive data to anti-abortion movement mega database. Now, anti-abortion lawmakers in the states are pushing a whole new wave of bills to force pregnant people seeking abortion to go to CPCs and create new state databases where their information will be stored. In short, the CPC industry is being set up as a publicly funded surveillance infrastructure for the anti-abortion movement post-Roe. If Roe falls, what's happening in Texas is a preview of what will happen on a much larger scale. A large number of Texas women are traveling to 7 nearby states under SB 8. 4 of those states will ban or severely restrict abortion after Roe as soon as the summer. Pregnant people in those states and 20 others will then join Texas trying to travel to 16 states protecting abortion. California alone expects out-of-state patients to increase 3,000% overnight. 75% of people seeking abortion in this country live in poverty. The majority are already mothers. Young, poor, people of color will be the most unable to buy themselves out of a forced pregnancy. Abortion is exceedingly safe. Staying pregnant in the US has become exceedingly dangerous. The US has the highest maternal death rate of all comparably developed countries and is the sole industrialized nation where maternal deaths are increasing, especially among Black women who are 2 to 3 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related cause. It's projected that post-Roe abortion bans will lead to a 21% rise in pregnancy-related deaths overall and a 33% increase among Black women. Moreover, a new wave of mass incarceration is expected from a flood of abortion-related prosecutions. Where abortion's banned and Republican-led states enact fetal personhood laws, any miscarriage can become legally suspect. This is already happening. Between 2020 and 2020, 2006 and 2020, more than 1,200 people were arrested in this country for pregnancy-related outcomes, mostly anti-abortion states. And finally, if the court overturns Roe, the right will undoubtedly use that court ruling to challenge our constitutional rights to contraception and marriage equality. So I'm going to end with that litany of horrors, but I just want to say there are things happening that are giving us hope and energizing our resistance and strengthening our abortion and reproductive justice strategies going forward. So I hope we can share some of that in the Q&A.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And I've purposely structured this so that we go from dire to hopeful, but also all of us are testament to how long people have been helping other people travel to access abortion care. You know, in the US, helping people travel for abortion care predates Roe v. Wade. And for as long as there have been abortions, there have been, groups practicing solidarity to help people get abortions. And also, you mentioned, of course, the situation in Ukraine and, Kasia, who's next, who, of course, is on the border of Ukraine. And we as Abortion Without Borders have already been getting requests from people, not just Ukrainian people, but also Russian people. And of course, you mentioned white supremacy and racism. There's all sorts of great press about these, white Ukrainians, but so much less about the people of color and the people from the Roma community and the other people who, as we know, are the most often marginalized and left out of these conversations, but we see them. So I am going to introduce Kasia, who is my colleague in Abortion Without Borders. Kasia is a Polish anarchist living in the Netherlands, where she is part of the Abortion Network Amsterdam Collective, otherwise known as ANNA. ANNA offers practical support in accessing abortion in the Netherlands to anyone in need in the spirit of radical solidarity. Since 2019, ANNA has, with 5 other groups, been part of the Abortion Without Borders initiative. So let's hear how things are in Poland.
Thank you, Mara, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join this panel and hear all your stories, especially on such a important day, the 8th of March, the International Women's Day. I grew up in communistic Poland, so this was always like a part of my life in communistic Poland. This was the day when you would receive your carnation and your pack of pantyhoses from communistic party delegates. This was the day when women were visible for one day a year. But despite its huge problems under communism, at least abortion was something that was not a problem at the time. Actually, at the time, Poland had one of the most liberal abortion rights. Abortion was available also in case of economic reasons, for example, which led to a situation that we hear about, that people from Sweden, for example, traveled to Poland to have abortion, and in Poland at the time. This has all changed in the early 90s. So with the changes in the system, the fall of communism, and the growing influence of Catholic Church, there were decisions made to change the abortion law. And as Mara said, it became one of the most restrictive one, allowing abortion only in 4 cases. In case of rape, incest, the danger to the life of the pregnant person, and fetal abnormalities. And that law was in place since 1993. So we're talking about almost 30 years of abortion, like a realistic abortion ban, because to receive the abortion within those 4 conditions, you had to go through quite strict and very complicated proceedings in hospitals. So we've seen in those 30 years, we've seen an enormous growth in stigma around abortion, in fear-mongering around the subject. Situation has been changing slightly with the introduction of the availability of the abortion pill and the existence of groups like Women on Waves and Women Help Women. In 2006, there was a group started, a forum, an internet forum has started to share information about possibility of self-managed abortion and medical abortion with pills. There have been other groups kind of joining the movement, activist groups inspired by abortion support networks and solidarity groups back in the history. Ciocia Basia in Berlin has, it's a collective that supports people traveling to Germany to access abortion there. Then we have Kobiety w sieci, the forum, which started in 2006. So Kobiety w sieci translates to Women on Web, which has been doing amazing introductory work towards abortion and fighting stigma and providing just day-to-day support to people having abortions with medication in their own homes. With abortion support network looking into other countries than only Ireland after the Irish referendum. Also other groups have been sparked. I represent Anna Abortion Network Amsterdam. We exist now for 4 years and support people traveling to the Netherlands to have abortion here, because Netherlands is a very special place on the abortion map of Europe, with the longest possible legal limit for abortion in the continental Europe at 22 weeks. In 2000, and not to forget, amazing job that Abortion Dream Team is doing. It's a small group with amazing following that started about a bit over 5 years ago, and they came up with the very radical for Polish conditions slogan saying abortion is okay, which broke the whole hell loose. It was too radical even for radical feminists to say in that way about abortion. Altogether, we with the 6 groups, we came inspired by the need for supporting people searching abortion. We came together in 2019, the end of 2019, to create Abortion Without Borders, an initiative that can provide practical, logistical and financial support to people seeking abortion, whether it's with pills, to have abortion safely at home, because that is not banned in Poland. You can have self-managed abortion, and it escapes the Polish law, because the law was introduced before the abortion pills were popular in use, and also to support people traveling to other countries, so traveling to Germany, to Austria, Netherlands, and UK. In 2000, in October, so we started in 2019. Just on the brink, a few months later, the pandemic started, making our work extremely difficult. But the worst thing happened a couple of months later. In October 2020, the Polish abortion law has been changed, removing the possibility of having abortion in case of fetal abnormalities. This sparked enormous rage in the public, and months-long protests have been taking place on the Polish streets. In the same, the slogans about abortion is okay, and the number of Abortion Without Borders helpline have been just put on every building and every street in all over Poland. Sorry, I'm still fighting COVID, so my voice is a bit cracking. I would also want to finish on a positive note, but at the moment, it's still hard. As Mara said, unfortunately, in the time after the change of law, there have been at least 3 people dying out of the situation where the fetal abnormality cases are not properly treated in Poland. Luckily, we are able to help people in need of abortion also in those cases. In the last year, we have helped over 34,000 people. And now, as it was mentioned, we also helping people from Ukraine. Over 1 million Ukrainians have entered Poland in the last 13 days. And many of them are also pregnant people. Many of them are searching for abortion. And with the difficulties, we are able to help them. I think my time is over. So if there are going to be any questions about the details, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks so much, Kasia. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, it is sort of like, just when we think things can't get worse, like we've been joking recently and saying, remember when we thought Brexit was going to be really bad? But actually Brexit does make Amsterdam, the Netherlands, an even more important destination for abortion in Europe, because very few countries have abortion on request after the first trimester. Like very, very few. The fact that France just announced that they would extend their legal limit from 14 to 16 weeks, and that's like a massive, massive deal. And the UK is closed to most of Europe now because, well, to most of poor Europe, because you now need a passport. You can no longer travel with a European ID. But all of these things are, challenges. And, we've been talking mostly about mainland Europe, but now we are going to come, to my neighbors to the north. To Northern Ireland. Naomi Connor is a co-convener of Alliance for Choice and a longtime trade unions and feminist campaigner. Naomi was heavily involved in the campaign to decriminalize abortion in Northern Ireland and continues to work for free, safe, local and stigma-free access to abortion healthcare for all who need it. And it's not in her bio, but I'm going to plug the Doula program that Alliance for Choice has been running, which is pretty spectacular, and I encourage all of you to check it out. Over to you, Naomi.
Hi, everyone. Firstly, love, strength and solidarity, I think, on International Women's Day. And I echo the sentiment of the first speaker, who sends solidarity to the women and people of Ukraine in a dire situation. I think in Northern Ireland, it demonstrates sort of very clearly, the progress of rights demonstrates very clearly why we need to move beyond the rights-based model. Of course, we need abortion and reproductive rights, but we also need justice, because I think the sort of geopolitical forces that are out there and that are stacked against abortion and reproductive justice have shown us what they can do to regress it. Now, in Northern Ireland, it's fair to say that we have made huge advances, because as many people in this meeting will know, we decriminalised abortion in October 2019. And in effect, what that means is women and pregnant people and those assisting them were no longer treated as criminals. However, that wasn't the end of the story, because it's Northern Ireland, and a wee bit like Brexit, it never is. So what we then faced was an anti-choice health minister who, at the onset of a global pandemic, decided that, despite the fact that abortion was no longer criminalised, that he wasn't going to commission abortion services in Northern Ireland. So we had a very frantic period at the onset of COVID in and around March 2020, when we were expecting a commissioned service, but actually we were, certainly for a short period of time, we were in a worse position than we were pre-decriminalisation, because women were told, you have abortion law, but you're not getting any services. So you can travel. And never mind that there's a global pandemic happening and everyone else in the world has been told to stay at home. Because you're a woman or pregnant person and you need an abortion, you can travel, even though that wasn't practically, logistically, or ethically sound either. So after a period of intense lobbying by all the campaigning groups, we finally got sort of some progress on commissioning. So at present, the Minister for Health has decided that the 5 health trusts in Northern Ireland who deal with health services and who should deal with abortion services could do what they wanted if they so wished to provide abortion services. So we have 4 services doing what, and really when I say services, what I'm talking about are dedicated health professionals in those hospitals and in those trusts who are providing the service in the midst of no support. So by non-commissioning, what I mean is the government here will not provide any extra funding for abortion healthcare. They won't provide a central point of access that is based in Northern Ireland. They won't even provide online information, which is a central access point for women and pregnant people to go and find out how they can get an abortion. They won't provide any money, they won't provide any training, and very importantly, they will not provide any central governance, which is not just a hostile climate for women and pregnant people, it's a hostile climate for those healthcare professionals who want to conscientiously provide services. And when we hear so much about conscientious objection, and actually I was just reading an article tonight whereby a doctor in Tyne and Wear, a Christian NHS doctor, all charges have been dropped against him for providing what he refers to as an abortion reversal pill. Of course, we know that there's no such thing. So it sort of demonstrates the hostility that our healthcare professionals have to work in. Now, I think it's also fair to say that lots of people in Northern Ireland who require an early medical abortion under 10 weeks can access that service and can do here. We don't have a telemedicine service. The rest of the UK, Scotland, Wales and Ireland have a telemedicine service. We don't have it, which means that women and pregnant people still have to attend at the clinic for the sake of one pill, which is a nonsense. We also have a trust and it's a rural trust, and from an infrastructural point of view, it's not good in terms of public transport, in terms of service provision. But essentially, that service has been withdrawn because of staff shortages. So women in the Western Health Trust have been told you still have to travel to England. We obviously assist them by putting them in touch with Women on Web or Women Help Women. But at the minute, what we're waiting on is a commission service, which will come about allegedly, and I say allegedly because those of us who've have worked on reproductive justice for a long time, everything is always in the horizon. It's never actually here. Everything you need is never here, right in front of you and accessible. But the Westminster government and the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland have intervened to say that they will direct the executive and have already directed the Department of Health to bring in services by the end of this month. Now, what I will say is the Stormont Assembly has now collapsed and we're going to have an election. So we don't know how the Secretary of State is going to instruct the executive to bring about a commission service. The Department of Health is dragging their heels, saying it's an unrealistic time frame. We wonder what they've been doing since October 2019 in order to bring about a commission service. If they're saying at the minute there isn't enough time, so that's a sort of snapshot. So if you need an abortion over 10 weeks, you're told to travel. If you need a surgical abortion for any reason, you have to travel or be refused. And if you are if you live in the Western Trust, then it's up to us. One of the good things that I'm going to tell you about is the Locked Caira abortion doula network, which we've set up. It launched formally last week. It's wonderful. We've been doing it underground for many, many years. So to take up that really public, brave space is something that we were really excited about, and we've been able to launch it on International Women's Day as part of that program of events. So it's been incredible. And again, it's about us not waiting for the patriarchy to dismantle itself. It's about us going ahead and doing it and leaving the patriarchy in the distance. So on that note, I'll end, and I'm happy to take questions at the end.
Always delighted to leave the patriarchy in the dust. The Northern Ireland situation, people actually don't believe me and probably don't believe you when we tell them like literally how messed up it is. And I wish I could say that in terms of provision in the UK, it was just a Northern Ireland issue, but currently in England, wait times at clinics are like up to 6 weeks, which is wonderful especially when you're traveling abroad and the price of an abortion doubles at 14 weeks and triples at 19 weeks. And I know Naomi and I have spoken in the past, there's just this like incredible amnesia in the rest of the UK that Northern Ireland is not covered by the abortion law, despite the fact that the last line of the abortion law is "this act shall not extend to Northern Ireland." But yeah, all the time people are like, "Oh, but people in Northern Ireland, they have abortions." Like, no, but they do. No, but they must. No. And it wasn't until 2017 that people from the north who traveled to England were able to access free care. And that I think only happened because Parliament was so cross with Theresa May for doing a deal with the DUP. But opinions like that are why I don't do politics. So now that we are all ready to put our heads in the oven over the, actually, no, I'm always able to, I think all of us always are able to find the moments of joy and the good things about abortion access. And also the fact that the people doing this work are literally just some of the best humans on earth, as are our clients. But I would like to go now to the island of Malta. And one of the reasons that is important that it is an island is, with COVID, when they closed the airports in Poland, okay, we got really creative about the Poland-German border, but in Malta, when they shut the airport, that was a horse of a different color, as they say in The Wizard of Oz. So Lara, I'm not going to butcher your surname again. I'm just going to say that you are the founder and director of the Women's Rights Foundation, which is an exceptional organization that everybody should look into. Lara has been actively advocating for women's rights with particular focus on violence against women and reproductive rights. She's led a number of human rights cases, is a casual lecturer at the University of Malta, and is currently a member of the European Women's Lobby, delegate to Women Against Violence Europe, and heads the Malta Observatory on Femicide. And, where do you find the time? But please tell us how things are going in Malta.
Thank you, Mara, and thank you all. I mean, it's a great honor to be here with such great panelists and great sheroes. And, just in a way, I come from a country where there is an absolute total ban, but hearing your stories and, seeing the clock reverse, to be honest, I find it extremely painful. So really, sisters, like, let's do this together. Let's continue to support each other, because I know even for me, Mara said, where do I find the time? I think it's just the support and the energy I get from people like you here, constantly. Without that drive and without, that sharing and buzz. Anyhow, so yeah, total ban, tiny island, a very colonized island up until the 1960s. So do keep that in mind. If we look a little bit at the law was created in 1850 when Malta was a British colony, and we still have the same law. So that's as far back as we go. Nothing has changed from the 1850 in our law, which says we have, it's criminalized. So on any circumstance and in any situation. So the women that access abortion or the women that support women to have an abortion, they can face up to 3 years imprisonment. And medical professionals face up to 4 years imprisonment and lose their medical license. Having said that, just to bear in mind that the last time that somebody was found guilty for having an abortion was in 2012, and there were 2 migrant women, simply because they didn't know that it was there was a total ban, and they went for one woman procured the tablets, the other one woman took the tablets, and then because of some complications, she went, for medical assistance, and with complete innocence, saying, I accessed, I took the pills, and then they both faced a suspended sentence and eventual deportation from the country. So that's how the situation is. Okay, so there was, if you look back then and we move on, we could see there were some shifts, and back in the 1980s, there was some discourse about abortion, and there was actually discussion even by the women's movement at the time to call for the decriminalization of abortion. However, that did not last very long. We then had a change of government, and we went back. You see, talk about the regression, that's exactly what we had. So by the 1980s, women could access, for example, free contraception in the local health centers. We had, there was a lot of conversation as well about women and their emancipation of their own sexual, body kind of thing. But this all regressed back in 1987, when we then had the center-right party that took over, and literally in 25 years, rolled back the time again, which is interesting in a way, sort of to see a little bit what's happening now, with the backlash to where we were, of women trying to push forward and then, turning back the clock. Malta is a Catholic country. The second article of our constitution says that Malta is a Roman Catholic country, and the church did have a lot of influence. So apart from us being insular and completely cut off from the rest of the world, okay, the only way that, we could travel was to, actually have the means and the finances for the privileged and those that could afford, to either cross by ferry to Sicily or to, then fly. You also had the church that was very powerful, I would say, up until the 1960s, 1970s. It even had an influence in politics, a bit like we're seeing, a little bit in Poland as well, and in many other countries. So that's the situation where we were. I wouldn't say that it doesn't have such a stronghold now, but it is losing a little bit in its power. So you only have 40% as opposed to 90% of the population that now will attend church and would follow the, Catholic teachings. It's become more of a tradition, however, still very proudly saying that they are Catholic. I would say that's also, I'm saying all of this because we also had a lot of this sanctification of motherhood. Okay, the Madonna is a very important figure in the country. And therefore you had the sacrificial mother that was constantly pushed. I grew up with that. Okay, I grew up with a situation where, yes, you know, you have to give your body and soul, because that is what the only thing I came on earth for, you know, is to bear children, you know, and continue like the progression of life. So you know, this is still very much felt. It's still very much felt up until today. You know, this kind of you know, slut shaming to the motherhood aspect. So it is something that we, you know, kind of have to now, in our campaigning, we're trying to also change the narrative for that as well. So it's like kind of deconstructing. I mean, I myself was shown the silent scream when I was in school. I was only 11 years old, so you can imagine how impressionable that has been, you know. So even for me, this was a journey to be where I am today, to find the courage and publicly, you know, come out and talk about it, because you become indoctrinated. There has been a lot of indoctrination, and we still have, unfortunately, anti-choice that do enter schools. So they're still entering into our schools, and they're still teaching children abstinence. And not to make it worse, we also have these anti-choice groups that are now being funded by the government to have the homes for, you know, mothers to be, you know, to support them in their journey. So this is what we still have as a situation. Having said that, not all is gloomy. My organization was the first organization to come out publicly and call for the decriminalization and legalization of abortion, amongst other things. And this started in 2016, because up until 2016, we did not have access to emergency contraception. It was still not licensed. So I could go to Italy, I could go to any other country, I could buy the tablets, bring them here, but I could not buy them here. So sort of in a way, this is where it all sprang, you know. This came from the grassroots women movement, and they started calling for the access to the morning after pill, and it kind of, you know, got the ball rolling. And I, you know, in a way say that from 2016 to now, I can attend such, you know, lovely places like here. I can publicly talk about abortion, and we have now a situation where at least abortion has remained on the discourse. Women are accessing abortion, and I think something that COVID, as Mara said, imagine how difficult it was during the COVID time when we were completely locked down and women could not travel. And I think this is where we started seeing an increase of women actually accessing the medical abortion, okay, through Women Help Women and Women on Web. So we calculate on average from data that we're given around, it's between 400 to 600 women that access the medical abortion every year. And then women obviously travel for other surgical reasons, but we not always have data for that unless it's published, they go to the UK, and then it will be published by the Department of Health in the UK. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty much what the situation is. We have now since created a coalition, and this year we thank our Irish support, you know, like the Irish workforce, you know, the great force that there was, because they inspired us to and showed, you know, how when you join the forces and when there are many of you, you know, it is louder and it is better. And that's exactly what we did. So we started off with one organization. Now we're a coalition made up of 12 organizations. And we also managed to have our amazing Doctors for Choice. I mean, they are a wonderful force, and they're more than one doctor. So it's great to see that even the medical professions, you know, unlike perhaps some other countries where they were struggled, that they actually came out in full force, and they're just wonderful to be with and to work with. And we have since now created FPAS, which is the Family Planning Advisory Service. Basically, we provide information. You know, it's kind of, we're trying to find ways of constantly pushing the boundary, okay, pushing the limit. So through FPAS now, we are providing the information on accessing abortion care. And of course, we push it as far as, you know, knowing people who contact us that have had an abortion, and if they need any medical support, you know, so we direct them accordingly. Of course, here I also have to thank Mara, who has been absolutely wonderful and so supportive through ASN in making us, you know, and getting us to where we are today. So thank you, Mara, here, and also thank you supporting our women from Malta. Yeah, we've had also sort of like, so we're seeing a little bit of the backlash that's kind of has affected perhaps more countries than us. So, when you get the government funding, the fact that we still have the anti-choice, going into schools. Yet on the other hand, we're also seeing a little bit of a shift in narrative. So even politicians up until very recently would not even want to go and talk about abortion. So they would completely, just say, oh, no, I am pro-life and proudly pro-life. To now we're starting to see some politicians that are coming out as being pro-choice. And we're also seeing politicians that are saying, like even political parties that are saying, okay, we need a discussion. So you can see that the shift, there is some form of shift that's happening. I still think it's early days, but at least it's not all doom and gloom. And in fact, one of the political parties today has announced that it's going to, in their political manifesto, is proposing free contraception, free IUDs, free sanitary services in schools. So, kind of like we're seeing a little bit of that shift. And also they're now talking about PGD testing, which is not allowed, so far it's not something that is possible. Women have to travel to do PGD testing. So the fact that, at least we're seeing that it will be introduced, kind of that will then shift the narrative on accessing abortion care. Yeah, we did have some situations where it have been quite unfortunate. Like in 2019, there was a woman who was in an abusive relationship, and she wanted to, leave the relationship, and the husband came up with the narrative that she was going to travel and wanting to access abortion care. Which was it was absolutely untrue. And he did actually take recourse. So he went to court and issued a warrant prohibiting the woman from traveling, which is something that is absolutely against the law, because you cannot stop any adult from traveling. You can stop children in case of, worry that there's going to be an abduction situation, but you can never stop an adult from traveling. And actually, yes, the court in this situation has actually upheld the warrant. And we had a situation where women, this woman in particular, could not travel at all. So you can imagine, sort of, it's kind of, you're seeing the shift in some ways, but then, when you come to the justice system, Jennifer, as we were saying as well, in America, we're still seeing this absolutely, extreme, I would say. Yes, Mara, I need to stop, do I? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just,
I could
that's
just
okay.
go on and on.
No, why don't
But
you?
thank you.
No, I want to say, and it might look like you haven't come a long way, but from an external person, you actually really have.
Yeah.
Even if you look at public opinion, it's gone from like 91% of people completely against abortion to 71%, and that's a massive shift in just a couple of years. And also, COVID really helped. People were so terrified of getting pills by post before COVID, and now the numbers of people traveling are very, very low, as they should be. So it's really been amazing to watch, and also to see so many people come forward. And I think all of us are very interested to see what's going to happen with our Maltese president of the European Parliament, keeping Malta out of the EU COVID agreement, but also saying that she will uphold the European Parliament's views on abortion. So let's see what political games are being played there. Is Caira here? Has she come? Yes, no. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and read her very short bio, just so that she is here with us in spirit. Caira Sakarini Banda is studying human rights at NUI Galway. Originally from Malawi, she's made Ireland her home since 2015, and she is a strong advocate for women's rights, inclusion, and diversity, and apparently is at her own book launch this evening. So perhaps our hosts will post information about the book in the chat, and I will go on to Gillian Kearns from an organization which I hadn't heard of, and as soon as I did, I literally love everything you all do. So Gillian is a disability justice and reproductive rights advocate, formerly coordinator of Waterford Together for Yes and member of Parents for Choice. She currently serves on the steering committee of Disabled Women Ireland. Go follow them on all the socials. Gillian is particularly passionate about gendered intersections in community building and neurodivergency, and was a founding member of Neuro Pride Ireland, a self-directed community space who hold an annual festival to celebrate neurodivergent communities and identities. So y'all are gonna have to give me a minute because I am doing Gillian's slides and I am a technology grandma. So one sec.
Thank you so much, Mara, for doing my slides, because I'm such a technology grandma, I couldn't do it myself. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to speak. I will be speaking a tiny bit about what the situation in Ireland, but I'll be focusing mostly on how it impacts the disabled community for obvious reasons. I suppose just for those who may not know, the Regulation of Termination of Pregnancy Act was passed in December of 2018 after the vote for repeal, and it allows for abortion up to abortion on request up to 12 weeks, and for abortion at a later gestation in the case of risk to health or life or severe fetal abnormality. It's led by general practitioners and sexual health providers, and then any additional provision is provided in hospitals, which is, you know, a hell of a lot better than it was before. However, it still maintains criminal penalties for anybody who helps outside of that new law in the terms of them, but it doesn't criminalise the person who has obtained the abortion, which is a significant difference. And those services were launched in January of 2019.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you all see the slides? Great. Okay, so just tell me when you need me to just say next whenever you need me to.
Yeah, next please. So this is just some key information about the disabled community in Ireland to give some background to what I'm going to talk about next. So a lot of the figures I'll have to take are from EU figures because we don't disaggregate a lot of information here in Ireland between disabled men and disabled women. So about 19.9% of women are disabled under the terms of the UN CRPD. There's higher rates of disability within already marginalised communities like the LGBTQIA plus traveller and ethnic minority communities. Ireland is considered the worst country in Western Europe for disabled people in terms of poverty, social inclusion and unemployment or underemployment. It's not a record we should be really proud of, to be honest. Disabled people are up to 3 times more likely to live in consistent poverty. Only 25.8% of disabled women are in employment compared to 71% of the general population. So even those who are in employment tend to be in part-time employment or low-paid employment. The UK figures show that half of disabled pregnant people experience intimate partner violence while pregnant, and disabled women are more likely, 4 to 5 times more likely to experience intimate partner abuse than their non-disabled peers. And over 8,000 disabled people still live in residential centres in Ireland, which has an impact later on some of the stuff I'm going to say. Next, please. So these are general issues that are identified with current legislation in Ireland. Currently, there's a 3-day wait. So what that means is that when you go for the first appointment, you then have to wait 3 days before you can have a second appointment where you get the pills. Obviously, that's, you know, in terms of logistics, in terms of expense, in terms of trying to organise it, it's very difficult for most people. There's also kind of a chilling effect that doctors and GPs seem to have taken, it that if you arrive, say, at 11 weeks plus 5 in your pregnancy, they will not give you the pill because then you'll be over the 12 weeks after that. So there's a lack of local provision. I think just recently, all counties have at least one person. But again, like Jennifer mentioned, we have an issue around conscientious objection. So you may go for one GP and find out, no, they won't. Now that has been addressed a bit by the My Options helpline that will help you find them. Safe access zones, we still don't have any legislation around safe access zones. So people will protest right outside the hospitals, especially maternity hospitals. And that can be very distressing for people who may be going in to receive difficult news. It may be distressing for people who have had pregnancies, difficulty in their pregnancies. And obviously it's very distressing for people who are trying to seek abortion care. Like Jennifer also mentioned, that we have an what we call them rogue agencies here, more so I think would be a bit more known as. And again, they are set up just to delay people, to give them false information and try and push them over the 12-week limit a lot of the time. Next, please. So I'm going to break it down into specific disability issues within those headings. So the 3-day wait is difficult for everybody. It's, there's no medical basis for it. It's just really a chilling effect, to be honest with you. But there's additional difficulties for disabled people. So planning and organising, if you're a disabled person who has personal assistance, you need to organise their hours. And most people only get between 1 to 5 personal assistant hours a week. So then you need to decide which appointment is more important for them to go with you with. You need to organise and check if the clinic is accessible. You need to organise specialised equipment such as hoists or accessible tables. Neurodivergent people in particular, I am one, struggle with executive functioning and planning difficulties. So even booking the first appointment can be difficult. Around transport, a lot of services like our national bus service and our rail service need at least 24 hours for notice for people who use wheelchairs. So they need to arrange that. And oftentimes they can arrive at the bus stop or at the train station and find that the ramp isn't organised and everything. So transport is a particularly difficult one for people who have mobility issues. A lot of disabled people have difficulty. It's difficult to predict if you will have the capacity ahead of time to be able to travel. You can't tell on the day whether you're going to be, especially if you have a chronic pain condition. And because of all these extra difficulties, trips can be arduous and challenging to do once, never mind twice in 3 days. If a person is living in a residential or institutional setting, they need to disclose to caregivers why they want to go. They may need help organising transport. So the whole area of privacy and confidentiality is extremely difficult, and it's not an easy thing to talk to people about. Again, for neurodivergent people, sensory differences can make travel to unfamiliar places very, very stressful and very, very difficult. And there are an awful lot of disabled people who aren't able to travel at all. Obviously, all this travel is it's an extreme considerable outlay. And as I mentioned, a lot of disabled people are either unemployed or living in consistent poverty. Around the inequality of access, like My Options, the helpline, is still not fully accessible. There was an introduction, and we welcome the introduction of the use of ISL, or Irish Sign Language interpretation, for deaf or hard of hearing people. But not everybody in the deaf community speaks ISL, and it doesn't help people with speech impediments. It doesn't help people with language processing impediments, or neurodivergent people who may be non-speaking or go situationally non-speaking. Like recent research has shown that 77.9% of autistic people report difficulty in using the telephone, especially in a medical context. I personally absolutely can't do phone calls. Easy to read information is still not available on the My Options website. There's no provision for people with learning or intellectual disabilities, even though that was promised, it's never materialised. Given the strict limits imposed by the legislation, we would call for the like the my options information to say whether a place is accessible or not, to say whether a service is accessible. So people don't have to spend, as I said, with the difficulties of planning an organisation, that they don't have to waste valuable time doing that work for themselves. There's also an insignificant understanding of accessibility in healthcare systems and communities. A lot of people seem to think that if it's wheelchair accessible, then that's accessibility, and there's no understanding of sensory differences and informational barriers. And as I said, the equipment, specialised equipment. So, sorry, next please, before I go charging ahead.
How are you doing on how much, because we're sort
of... I will actually just rush through everything else, if
Great.
that's okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of disabled people are seen as desexualized and do not receive proper sex education, or their healthcare, their sexual health and reproductive options aren't discussed with them. So this can lead to unplanned pregnancy. Conditions like ADHD, POTS, diabetes, endometriosis impact the menstrual cycle. And, you know, so you may not know, you may have an irregular period, you may not know that you're pregnant. I have ADHD, I have problems with interoception, and I didn't know I was pregnant both times until I was at least 8 weeks pregnant. It's very common. 10.6% of people with ADHD have unplanned pregnancies. Intimate partner abuse, as I mentioned before, can impact here, where people are stopped from going to appointments before the 12 weeks is up. Access needs, again, can impact on accessing a place that's accessible before the 12 weeks is up. Next, please. I mentioned that there are some cases where you can get the post the 12-week limit, you can access abortion. However, it's been found that that definition of health is very restrictive. Existing diagnoses can act against you. Your competency and capacity can be questioned. Neurodivergent healthcare difficulties in particular, the research that I mentioned before has found that autistic people in particular struggle to get their doctors to understand their non-neurotypical communication and don't get taken seriously. We don't present the way doctors may think we should, or in distress. Next, please. Again, this is just going back to the lack of local provision obviously impacts on difficulties with transport, with planning and information, and difficulties with unfamiliar healthcare and healthcare providers and settings. Next, please. Safe access zones, as I said, it's a difficult situation for most people. However, for neurodivergent people, people with CPTSD, people who suffer from anxiety, we're extremely sensitive to environmental input, especially in the times of stress. Autistic people, this can lead to autistic people going into shutdown or meltdown and prevent them from accessing healthcare at all. And obviously, as I said, people with anxiety would struggle to face that hostile situation in already difficult circumstances. Next, please. Vulnerability to false information, lack of sex education, as I mentioned before, and the state has a duty of care to provide information and to specific to people with intellectual and sorry, I've lost my place. This is particularly important around the fact that a lot of autistic people and people with intellectual disabilities may not know that they are receiving false information. They will take what they've been told as the truth. Next, please. Further thoughts, we would call for telemedicine to be continued, it won't solve everything, but it is one of the most effective ways of dealing with the barriers caused by lack of accessible transport and insufficient access to personal assistance and inaccessibility of doctors' practices. It's not by itself sufficient to address the systematic accessibility issues, but it will go. It's an invaluable support. DWI will call for full decriminalisation. It's found by the UNCRPD that only full decriminalisation of abortion provision can be provided a framework under which human rights of pregnant people's autonomy and the value of disabled people's lives can be guaranteed. It's always also the only way to support doctors to make the best medical decisions that they can with the best interests of their patients. We also call for data collection disaggregated for disability, because at the moment we don't have that kind of information of how many disabled people are accessing abortion. Just the Assistant Decision Making Capacity Act, I'm just mentioning that now. That was written at a time when the 8th Amendment was still in the Constitution. And even though the 8th Amendment has been repealed and taken out of the Constitution, it is still in the Assisted Decision Making Capacity Act. So there are still people in this country who cannot access that abortion under the 8th Amendment. So that was just a thing to mention. DWI would also say that any provision which seeks to restrict or allow access to abortion on the grounds of non-fatal fetal impairment are discriminatory and contribute to the significant stigma around disabled lives. And then next, please. These are just some of the articles of the UN Convention on People's Rights to Disability that are pertinent to abortion. However, I draw your attention to the final one, Article C. Provide these healthcare services as close as possible to people's own communities, including in rural areas. Why DWI feels this is really important is that this is a state mandate. This is an article that can be used to get local access for everybody. The state has an obligation to provide this under the UNCRPD. And if they're providing it for disabled people, then it will be available for everybody. So that's why I just wanted to draw people's attention to that. And I think that's the end, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank you very much,
Gillian.
Mara.
No, thank you. Let me stop sharing. And I could wax poetic for a very long time about abortion in the Republic of Ireland. As anybody who follows me on Twitter knows, I have quite a bit of rage. But Gillian, thank you very much, because those obstacles that impact people with disabilities are many of the same obstacles that impact, other people from marginalized groups. Okay, so we have just about 15 minutes for Q&A. I'm going to have a quick look in the chat. There is one question and one comment. Somebody has asked if I will share that they are crying because they have ADHD and no one has ever talked about them. So I think that's a thank you. So thanks to Gillian for that. And of course, we all try and make sure that all voices and all people, we're very pro-choice on very many things in this crowd. Then there's a question. There's one question for Laura, but before I go to the questions in the chat, and thank you to the Abortion Rights Campaign for putting the information about Caira's book in the chat as well, I would like to know if any of the panelists have any questions for each other. So if you want to have a think about that as well, you can also be called in. The first question is for Laura. when you mentioned the homes for mothers to be, do you mean all mothers and pregnant people, or those who are undesirable, like the Magdalene laundries that they had in Ireland? Wait, is she gone? Oh, no, there you are. Oh, but you're on. There you go. You're on mute.
Okay, I'm here. Sorry, I had to switch onto my mobile. No, it's not the same. It's not the same. These are kind of like it's a bit copied from, or rather the way they went about it was a little bit copied from what was happening in Ireland. Okay, so where they were just coming up like with their own helpline, and then like, you know, talking women out of having an abortion. So they would fake the helpline or fake a number.
Oh shit! Oh God! I'm so sorry. I forgot Kaylee. Oh
No
my
problem.
goodness! I'm so sorry, and sorry for swearing. I am so
Please,
stupid.
please let Lara finish, and
Yeah,
then
I'm so
and then I'm
sorry.
happy. It's fine.
Sorry.
No problem. Basically that's what it is. So it's just you know, I know some, you know, they kind of talk women out of having an abortion, and then, you know, by offering them the support, and they put them in these homes, and then as soon as they give birth, they're back out on the street. So that's pretty much what it is. It's really quite vile.
I am so very, very sorry. I had closed my notes, and of course, Kaylee and I have been in touch all day. So also, Kaylee is like the most happy example of what we have going on here, which is literally the shortest space of time I have ever seen in my entire life, from launch of a campaign to law change. And then from law change to provision, I think it was literally 2 months or less. So Kaylee was born and raised in Gibraltar. She is and settled in the UK 15 years ago after graduating from university. She became involved in the fight for reproductive rights in Gibraltar when the movement started in September 2018, helping with graphic design, social media management, and online activism, which all of us know is super important, especially now. And please, Kaylee.
It's okay. I was just a bit confused. I didn't know if you were doing the Q&A or if you'd come to me after. I didn't know what was happening. So anyway, I'm very, very nervous, but I will go on. And if it's okay, I will refer to my notes, because a bit like Gillian said, I do have trouble organizing my thoughts sometimes. And it would just turn into a really long nonsense ramble. So situation in Gibraltar before the movement started, it was a very similar law to the one that Lara mentioned, one from the 1850s or 1870s. I can't remember the exact date. It was pretty much an outright ban on abortion. But the punishment was much more strict. It's life imprisonment for anyone who would access an abortion or anyone assisting them. Thankfully, nobody has been prosecuted, but, you know, in the hands of an awful government, you know, they could have implemented those rules and had people in prison. So after a few attempts in previous years, the movement kicked off in September 2018 after Isabella Lull, one of our members, or she became one of our members later. She's an ex-MP, and she's just very well known in Gibraltar, very popular, well known. She used to work in TV and stuff, so a lot of people knew who she was. She has a large following on Facebook. She had a very ranty Facebook post, which was brilliant, and she was just saying it's about time Gibraltar decriminalized abortion, and it really gained traction, and it launched the hashtag No More Shame on Facebook. So very quickly, sort of behind the scenes, we scrambled a little group together, and we started sort of you know, talking about what we were going to do as a group, we kept the conversation alive, and we just kept on and on and on, and kept the conversation going on social media mostly, but it ended up sort of in the media. It ended up in newspapers through letters and things to the big newspapers and stuff in Gibraltar. So along with the strong voice of our Member of Parliament, Marlene Hassanan, she was the only one who spoke publicly about abortion. The others didn't really want to talk about it. They really skirted around the issue. Marlene was the only openly pro-choice MP in Parliament, and along with No More Shame and a few smaller groups, we kept up the pressure. And people used to write to No More Shame anonymously to share their stories with us of having had abortions in previous decades. Gibraltar's border was closed under the dictatorship of Francisco Franco in Spain, and the border opened again in the 80s. So since the 80s, pregnant people and women from Gibraltar would go over to Spain most of the time to have their abortions. So we were able to amplify the voices of these people who have had their abortions. You know, they'd had them in secrecy and in shame. And Gibraltar is a very multicultural country, but it considers itself a Catholic country. And I put that in quotes because I would say that most people are culturally Catholic, a bit like what Lara was saying. People do get baptized, the majority do get baptized Catholic, but they follow the traditions and the sacraments and things. But in terms of how devout they are, I think that really, really varies. So yeah, but there's a lot of Catholic guilt, as you may imagine, that has stuck around for a long time, and it still sticks around, I'm pretty sure. So under pressure, our chief minister felt that he and the government could no longer ignore the issue, and they launched a public consultation. I know that Mara sent in her sort of recommendations. We recommended that the law allow abortion up to 24 weeks in line with the UK, and many individuals and NGOs responded. You know, those for a change in the law, those against it, obviously. So bearing in mind that our law was as it was, anyone procuring an abortion would be could have life imprisonment. You know, in our recommendations, No More Shame's recommendations, we spoke about the inadequate sex education that we had in Gibraltar, and we were also subjected to the silent scream in school. That was horrific. Sorry, yes, oh, and we had no sexual health clinic to speak of at all until about 2018. I think I think it was being set up quietly in the background, but around the time that we launched as an organization as No More Shame, the sexual health clinic set up as well. So that's, oh yes, so with the government sort of acknowledging that they couldn't stay quiet, they did, Parliament did acknowledge that at some point they would meet and debate and vote on the issue, which would decide whether or not they would change the law. In July 2019, so it was quite a while that we had to wait, before the session in Parliament, the night before the session in Parliament, they announced that it would be going to referendum. Of course, both groups, pro-choice and anti-choice, actually were rather outraged by this. We did not want a referendum. So both sides very quickly, because they announced it quite late that night, like I say, I think they behind the scenes, and us as well, sort of we quickly scrambled to arrange a little protest outside Parliament as the session was going on. We were very loud, I can assure you. The other side were not impressed with how loud we were. And my job as graphic designer, I had to quickly scramble and work late into the night making placards for people, and I made them publicly available so people could print them off and take them with them the next day. We had a younger demographic in general. So so we couldn't get that many people out there to the protest because, you know, they have jobs, children, obligations. The other side had a lot older demographic representing them. It didn't look great for them, but what can I say? So it was very much a DIY job on our side. The other side, they had a rally, I think, a few weeks before this protest. So they had all their professionally printed signs. They looked very organized next to us. But, you know, anyway, it was a very, very long 6-hour session. And the bill was passed, thank goodness. And we accepted the fact that the referendum, was our fate. And sort of, we quite quickly started to assemble a coalition of groups, an alliance of groups, pro-choice groups, and see who we could work with, who we couldn't work with, and stuff like that. And we formed Gibraltar for Yes. We were determined to be the yes vote. We wanted it to be the positive vote. So fast forward, our referendum was originally scheduled for the 19th of March in 2020, and it was cancelled just a week before the vote. Due to COVID, obviously, the situation was escalating all over the world and lockdowns were imposed just days later, just days after our campaign was suspended. In between times felt like a state of limbo, but we had a few online meetings to discuss what would happen with our campaign. You know, we discussed all the possible scenarios. We would see, you know, are we just going to do the last week of the campaign? Would we start from halfway, or would we have to start from scratch? The TV debates hadn't happened or anything like that when the campaign was suspended. So, you know, we didn't know. So in those in-between times, I did have time to prepare a lot of my graphic design work, which is very, very time and labor intensive. So I suppose that gave me an opportunity to improve on what we had done well, and, you know, to keep doing what we were doing well, but also improve on what we hadn't done so well. So yeah, just a lot of opportunities, very tiring though. So restarting, yeah, we were lucky that in our campaign in 2020, it was largely online, so we could just continue campaigning online. And we were able to keep that up. People did love our stalls and meeting the team in person, you know, and we, my team members in Gibraltar, because remember I'm in the UK, my team members in Gibraltar, once it was safer, they went and they met people outdoors and things. And, you know, there were some great events that happened outdoors. And yeah, when people did meet our team outside in the town, they would come to our online platforms. So, you know, it did work well for us. During COVID times, we, out of curiosity, went to organizations such as Women on Web and a clinic in Spain, one of the clinics that we know of in Spain that helps women in Gibraltar access their abortions. There was 100% increase in those asking for assistance from Women on Web in 2020 compared to 2019 in that year. And we found that there was a 66% increase those seeking abortions at the clinic in Spain that is just half an hour away. So our concern during lockdown was whether or not people could access abortions. And I know that Mara was particularly concerned, and she did message us and ask us if we knew anything, and unfortunately we didn't really. So we kept in contact to see what we could do. So one of the services that we contacted was willing to share quite a lot of information with us. Obviously anonymously, so we don't have details of names or anything like that, but it confirms what other countries have reported, which is that the largest proportion of service users are people who already have children. So it's not just the young ones, as our anti-choice friends would suggest. You know, a lot of them are parents. So returning to campaign, we did have to start from scratch in the end. Another exhausting 6 weeks. Oh gosh. Do I need to stop, Mara?
Wrap up, because it's, but not stop, just, time.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, 6 weeks of campaigning. We did win in the end. I'm not going to go through everything that I was going to say. We did win in the end, thankfully. And the service was implemented within about 3 weeks, I think. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about the service since it's been implemented, because it seems to be running fairly smoothly. In the 6 months since the service started, about 15 people went to ask for help, 4 of whom actually decided to keep going with their pregnancies, and 11 chose to terminate. And the majority of those, thank goodness, used pills. A problem that we've sort of learned about is that the surgical procedures are happening in the day surgery in the general hospital that they have in Gibraltar. It's a very, very small community, and the chances of running into somebody at day surgery are really high. So I think that's an issue that's being looked at. Other issues that have sort of come up, there have been hiccups in separate services like the sexual health clinic and obstetric and gynae, and which could have a knock-on effect onto the abortion services. Sexual health clinic has had a lot of staffing issues since it started, basically. I think they're starting to improve that. And the reason this is important is because referrals for abortions can come from the sexual health clinic. The other issue that we've had are 3 gynecologist contracts were coming to an end in Gibraltar, and they weren't being renewed. Gibraltar previously had issues where there was no continuity of care for gynae and obstetric services, and there was 1 permanent gynecologist and the rest were locums, and the non-renewal of contracts meant a possible return to that lack of continuity in care. So the midwives were really unhappy about this and took industrial action. Contracts have been temporarily renewed, and we're not sure what the future holds, so we need to watch this space for that. So hopefully our services will continue to run fairly smoothly, but people over 12 weeks of pregnancy will continue to have to travel. Thank you very much, and happy International Women's Day.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. And the good news is, well, the bad news is we're out of time. It is just gone 8:30 or 9:30 for some of our compatriots. The good news, I guess, is that there are no questions in the chat, so I don't feel like I'm robbing anybody. I will say that this has been hugely delightful to spend this time with all of you and to see how many similarities there are in the work that we are all doing, themes of, what is a good law and who is left behind. And, there's an academic, Sidney Culkin, who says that all legislation should be based on those who are hardest to serve. And I think all of us have experience of abortion laws that were not made that way. And there's, I'm sure that in Gibraltar you have the same as we have in Ireland, and also in Northern Ireland, which is like, oh, it's all set though. Abortion's fine. Everybody can get one. Which almost, in America, what are you talking about? And, whereas those of us who've been working in the States, we're like, where have you been? Like, it's not even comparatively worse right now than it was 10 years ago. It's just now you've noticed. But I think the thing that always shines through is just how many people out there are willing to get involved in this work. Even people who like Lara, who grew up anti-abortion, how not to single you out, many people I'm sure on this call. I'm feeling a little bit jealous because I haven't seen the silent scream. I think we're gonna maybe have to do some sort of Zoom watch with bottles of tequila or whatever your tipple of choice is. But this has just been really, really great. All of us have organizations that you can follow on social media, or sign up for newsletters or get in touch. Wherever you are, I guarantee there is somebody that you can help either change an abortion law, bolster an abortion law, or help somebody to access an abortion. And on this International Women's Day, you know, for us, that's every day. Every day is a day where we can help, you know, our sisters and our siblings access their human rights. I don't know, Dorina, do you want to come back in and do a close? Yes. They've just put a link in the chat about how to do a submission to the 3-year review of the repeal of the 8th Amendment, the abortion legislation that was put in. There's Dorina. So,
Thank you. Sorry.
thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you so much. And as I mentioned before, I think we've all really learned why all of our organizations are so important and will remain really important. And yeah, just it was really good learning for me, and I'm sure everyone else who joined in. So just thank you all for sharing your International Women's Day evening with us. And I'm sorry we didn't get time to have a chat among ourselves, or for panelists to ask each other questions, because I'm sure there was many, but we all have each other's email addresses now, and hopefully we'll all meet again soon, and maybe even in person. So just again, thank you so much, and happy International Women's Day to everybody. An amazing chair for this event. Much love and solidarity to everybody.